So we just had the end of a series with two female best friends who share in tumultuous times in Dead to Me. And now we get not the end, but another season of something somewhat similar. Sarah Chalke and Katherine Heigl return in the Netflix drama series Firefly Lane. The huge question is, will we get to find out why Kate no longer wants anything to do with Tully? Kate grapples with the painful aftermath of Johnny's ill-fated trip to Iraq, while Tully faces a lawsuit after walking away from her talk show and must start her career over from the bottom. And the biggest question from season 1 lingers with what could possibly have ended the tight-knit 30-year friendship of Tully and Kate. Now, the second season starts off with 9 episodes, but it's just part 1 of season 2. The second part's going to be arriving sometime in 2023. I'm not sure how many episodes that's going to contain, but it seems weird that this episode wasn't just the 9 episodes, and then the next batch is released and called season 3. It's not though, so whatever. Now this continues in the triple timeline storytelling, where one storyline takes place in the mid-70s, one in the mid-80s, and then one in the mid-90s. There are moments where this got a bit confusing. I mean, not necessarily with the decade shift, but when things would happen like 3 weeks later in a decade. I was having a bit of trouble figuring out where in time we were, since the show continually bounces around in time. Now the drama continues to be extremely high, bordering at times on soap opera, but as much as I tried to fight it, I was completely sucked into this season. I especially enjoyed the 70s timeline because it really gives us huge insight into what made the girls into the women we see in the present. Now, they endure so much and experience so many big moments together. It's no wonder that they have such a tight bond that has lasted decades. But then that leads to the question that season 1 hung on us. Why did Kate tell Tully she never wanted to see her again? Well, luckily, we finally get an answer. But it doesn't come immediately. We have to be patient as the story builds to that moment. And you will be able to figure it out before the scene actually happens. But that doesn't lessen the emotional impact. That lead up and outcome are tough. I mean, there are even heartbreaking moments and times where I was really upset with a certain character, even though I got the emotion. And then when we get to the part 1 finale, I was a little perturbed with one of the characters because it seemed very self-centered with a particular action. Yes, I'm being very vague on purpose. I mean, I know what the character means well, and overall there is a growth moment in this, but in that instant, it comes across as selfish. Now, this whole season is very heavily focused on family, and they execute it just so well. I mean, in the 70s, we watch not only Tully and Cloud interact and the lack of parenting that goes on between them, but we also get to watch Kate's family be that surrogate to Tully every time she needs the support. There's also a bunch of backstory on Sean, who's Kate's brother, and how that then spills out through the decades. And there are some really soft moments with this arc that I really enjoyed. And we also get to watch the drama that is Kate and Johnny. I mean, from their dating in the 80s to their family life and subsequent divorce in the 90s. And it's a complex storyline, and while it is tough to watch the dissolution of a relationship, it's also encouraging to watch as they still try to support each other and their daughter. And with Johnny, we get to see some really great interactions in the 80s with him and Kate's dad. And that's going to resonate with anybody who's ever tried to connect with a partner's family, but had almost zero in common in tastes or pursuits. I mean, there's certainly a culture clash here, but it's entertaining to watch it all play out. Now, each of the 9 episodes hovers around that 50-ish minute range, so this is going to take a chunk of time to binge. But if you are like me and you find yourself very invested in all the drama, I mean, this becomes very easy to hit the next episode button repeatedly. But even with that, I think some of this becomes a bit drawn out, especially as we watch the events overlap from episode to episode. We'll get a glimpse of something or see a scene from one perspective, and then later we'll see how that other responds to that scenario. And while it's still interesting to watch, it does begin to add time over the course of the whole show. And I think there are opportunities to tell a more concise and efficient story. Now, something that I didn't really pay attention to at first, but I ended up appreciating from a visual standpoint now, is the filter effects that are present for each of the decades. The 70s has a yellowish hue to just about everything, and it has a slightly soft edge to it. And the 80s, it also has a small softness to some of the focus, but still it's crisper than what we see in the 70s. And the 90s, that storyline, it's very crisp. And while none of these makes it feel like the lens is dirty or it's out of focus, it just helps to represent the time in a different and subtle way. Now, also, the costume designs are so great as they capture each era and help to place us in that time frame without feeling klutzy or like it's trying too hard. The settings feel very natural and they fit, down to the clothing colors and the hairstyles. And I'm really impressed at how they were able to get an actor who looks very similar to Katherine Heigl to play the teenage version of her. Ali Scoveby is the actress, and there is a very strong resemblance, especially when that's combined with mannerisms, expressions, and vocal tones. Now, Roan Curtis, who plays young Kate, she's good also, but there is a certain difference between her and Sarah Chalke that isn't noticeable in the other pair. Now, as part one wraps up, there's a certain predictability to what happens, but that doesn't take away from the emotional impact that we watch. It's going to be a tough wait for part two, but I mean, if the storytelling style is anything like it is with part one, any answers we hope to get, they're not going to be delivered right away. But I think if we have patience, we will be rewarded with a moving and rich emotional story. So overall, part one of season 2 of Firefly Lane weaves a compelling narrative of intense friendship over the course of 3 decades. The acting is emotionally engaging and palpable, with some very raw and relatable moments that capture real life. And while the story did meander a bit more than I'd prefer, and the storytelling style of bouncing between times can sometimes be a bit hard to keep up with, the overall tale of Kate and Tully, it's rewarding and complex with just a touch of melodrama. There's sex, nudity, a ton of profanity, and some violence, including sexual assault. I give season 2, part 1 of Firefly Lane 4 out of 5 couches. So who's your favorite character in the show? I think for me it'd be Cloud, simply based on the character progression that we watch with her. But let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.